Okay, take it away, historian.
Okay, we started in 1834 on the Cushman Farm. It's about a mile away from here. Then we moved to Empire Grove. We had a lease, we had a 99-year lease from Nehemiah Strout. The first structure was the preacher stand built in 1840. Still stands.
Boom.
We're here today with our fabulous historian, Emerita Beverly Pratt, 27 years, our fabulous historian, and she's going to go through her tour of Empire Grove with us. So take it away, Miss Beverly.
Empire Grove Camp Meeting. We don't know where the camp meetings started. We think it was in Kentucky by two brothers, Presbyterian and a Methodist. This was in the late 1700s. And we assume it started because they didn't have churches and they were rural communities and they wanted to get together and hear some of the fabulous preachers that were on horseback, actually. Now, we are a historic site. And now you will see this is an itinerant preacher on a horse. And so the Presbyterians gave it up. That wasn't their style. But the Methodists, because we were the itinerant preacher, would go from camp meeting to preach. This particular camp meeting started about 2 miles from here, actually, on the Cushman Farm. Now I have a sense that once the horses started coming and people came with their tents, the Cushman Farm sort of suggested we find a different place. This was in 1834. So we found this plot of land, which is now 99 acres, and a man who was willing to lease it to us for 99 years, providing we had a camp meeting every year. And that became a problem in the war years because people could not get here because of gas rationing. So 4 men came onto the grounds, had a meeting, and then that was it. That was the camp meeting for that year, but it fulfilled the obligation to Nehemiah Strout. I am standing on the oldest structure on the campground. This is the speaker stand. It was built in 1840. And how do we know that? Well, because the Lewiston Evening Journal said so. 1840. We still use it, of course. We have a bell that we ring for all the events. We have, all you can see is the bell cord, but there is a bell up there. And we take very good care of this structure. Because we're a historic site, there are certain things that we are not required to do, but we think we should fulfill. And maintaining this speaker stand is one of them. Every once in a while, it's repainted. Every once in a while, it's leveled. Every once in a while, the roof is replaced. It is our special structure. Now, you can't see it because it's not there, but out here, in amongst these trees, which weren't there then, were seats. Seats with backs yet. And this is where they met 3 times a day for services. Now the seats have long since rotted away. And the building next door was built as a chapel. And the bottom of it was open. And the seats were inside, and they could be out of the weather and still hear the speakers. The upstairs rooms were bedrooms because not everyone really was excited about coming with a tent and putting it up for a week and then taking it down and taking it away. As far as camp meetings go, this was perfect. The ground is level. We have a wonderful water supply. We have trees so that you could cut the limbs off for your tent poles. And we have shade. And according to any camp meeting manual that you read, those are the 4 things that are necessary for a successful camp meeting, is your location.
That's the stand. And there's our fabulous historian, back again.
Now there are some stories about that bell, and it has been said that a historian will record all the facts that happened and then record the facts as they might have happened. So in my case, I have researched that bell, and it was always thought that it was given to us by the railroad company because they brought so many people here by train just for the services, not to stay here especially, came in for the day. So I've had people up on that roof looking at that bell, thinking there should be a name or a year, and there's nothing. So I just say it was given to us by the railroad. Some railroad, don't know which one. Now let's go along this circle. All the tents were in a circle, as close as they could get to each other. Basically because that's why they came. They came to be close to people. They're 10 miles apart probably in the farmland, and they come to be close. So one right beside each other were the white tents. And where did they get the white tents? Well, not from Sears Roebuck. They bought 40 yards of cloth, and they sewed a tent. They put it on a tent platform, then they folded up the tent and took it away for another year. Now this is what used to be the chapel. It has bedrooms at the top, not for us anymore, but they were bedrooms. And if they didn't have a tent, then they could rent a bedroom. And also the bottom part of that was open so that they could sit out of the weather and listen to the speakers 3 times a day. This building right here is my pride and joy. It was a woodshed. And as you notice as we walk around here, all of the houses have that roof, but they've also added things on. So it was always hard to tell anybody who came for a tour that, well, pretend all that's off. And that didn't work. So this was a woodshed, being used as a woodshed. It's a perfect Gothic carpenter cottage. And right now, as you see, they are replacing the roof. We take our buildings very seriously here. And I know a lot of people aren't too excited about history. They want to change something. Well, not here. We are a historic site. Now, between this cottage And that cottage, there would have been at least 3 cottages, at least.
We are here with our historian in the historical cottage. Take it away, Beverly.
Everything in this cottage has come from cottages that are still on the grove, cottages that are no longer on the grove, buildings that are no longer on the grove. But we have a pictorial record of all of it thanks to our photographer, Mary Irish, who was here from 1900 to about 1922. These started as glass negatives. She took the glass negatives and went under the stairway of her cottage and made postcards. I took the postcards and had laser prints made, and this is what we have on the wall, the laser prints. This cottage is an absolute original. When it came back to the circle, we took everything off of it, the old roof, we took off the loft, and kept it just as it would have been in 1881. What you see on the floor is an original tent platform, because that is how all of these cottages began. They built a tent platform, and then they took their tent and went away for the winter. Then they packed it all up and came for camp meeting. After a number of years of doing this, folding down this tent, they decided that this particular camp meeting was going to keep going. So they started building these little houses. And this particular one is an absolute, authentic Carpenter Gothic cottage. Now that has been validated by the Maine Preservation Society. And several things that make it authentic Gothic. You see these boards? You see how this is put together with these vertical boards? You see, they are not all the same. They are upright vertical boards of varying widths. Either that's what they had, or that was the pattern. That's how you did it. It has a high-pitched roof. It has a Gothic window over the front door. And you see that our front doors are double doors, because that represents the tent flaps of earlier days. Now, as I said, everything in here has come from either other cottages or other buildings. This is an original bed. Came from the lodging house. That is what they had for springs. Then they would take this, that they called ticking, and fill it with corn husks or straw. That was their mattress. Now, we don't have it filled with corn. No, we don't have it filled with anything. Then the quilt. This really, if you'll see this quilt, it has been made with all kinds of pieces of cloth. I suspect they probably made it at home and brought it here, and they left it here. This is the quilt. Now this is an extraordinary quilt here because it was in the manager's cottage, so it's authentic, but it's been signed by the women who put this together, and we have no idea who these women are, but it's a beautiful quilt, in good shape, but it just has a solid back, not like the other one, where they used all the pieces from wherever. Now this is a picture of the willing workers. And so I believe, yes, they're coming down from Sunset Hill. It was always a very patriotic campground. They always had flags, always had American flags. And so one of our Grovers made this to match the one that Berdina Catlin is carrying. She would be proud. This represents the outhouse. Well, I guess I call it from the lodging house, useful for nighttime journeys. This is what got them from their cottage to the outhouse and back. This is our latest contribution to the museum. This organ is well over 100 years old, and it was used up until probably 2 years ago. It was used in the regular chapel, but before that it was used in the old chapel, and before that it was used on the speaker stand. It was in somebody's cottage. We haven't been able to track whose cottage that it started out in, but whatever cottage it was, they would haul it to the speaker stand for the service and back to the cottage. Then they would haul it to the chapel, the old chapel, but they could leave it there for the week because that was a building. And then when we had the new chapel, now new was in 1975, it was placed there, and that's where it stayed until, as I say, a couple of years ago, when the mice got into it and did so much damage that it was going to be prohibitive to have it repaired. So as historian, I said, I'll take it. And there it sits. It's a pump organ, of course. If we ever had somebody on the grounds who knew something about organs, perhaps we could have it fixed. They use this every morning during camp meeting for the communion service, for the 8 o'clock communion service, because it was just special. They pumped the organ, had it for communion. Everything over here for the most part are buildings that no longer exist. The boarding house, the restrooms, the old gate, the dining hall. And when they took down the boarding house, when they leveled it in 1974-75, this was how it was put together. They saved the wooden pegs as they hauled everything else off. This was live. The pitcher pump, yes, that was actually what they used. We don't have anything that's a reproduction. Like, these plates were found in various places. Hannah Jackson was quite a collector of plates, and so she donated them to the museum. The signs that you see up above are the actual signs that used to be on the road to invite people in. This is really a nice collection. This is the boarding house dining room, and it is the only association building that was taken down. The other building that wasn't really taken down, it was the old restroom building, and it was hauled out by Carol Akers, and in return he gave us one of the benches that was in the restroom, public restroom bench. The bench at this point when it came in here was 40 years old, so it held a lot of people. Now, I would get in there and straighten that picture up, but it's quite a combination to get in there. You have to have a screwdriver. It's a kind of a secret way into this, because that's the original bell that was used to call people to their meals.
And we won't tell people how to get in there on YouTube.
And these are the original plates that were used. In the dining hall, original plates called Budded Vine and Wheat. So, and the pictures cannot be replaced if somebody should happen to take those. So it's kind of, we got this funny kind of a lock there. Hopefully they'll still be there. Now every once in a while we get things in a kind of a strange way. There is a Driscoll cottage. It had a shed behind it. And Barbara Driscoll wanted a new shed. So Stuart Price tore the old shed down, and in the shed there was a sign. Now that's obviously a cottage sign. But whose cottage, I wonder? Well, I tell you, Mary Irish took a picture of this. Where did it go? Mary Irish. Oh, that's Poland. Mary Irish. Here it is. Here it is. Right here. 49 Broadway Circle. You see the sign. The sign says Marcellus. Now, I happen to know who owned that cottage. I mean, I happen to know their daughter. So I went to Bangor and asked about this sign. It so happened that the lady who built the cottage was a hairdresser. And in those days, there was hairdressing called Marcel, all the little waves. So she called her cottage Marcellus. She had a sign made. She left at some point, and the people who bought the cottage took the sign off because it really didn't mean much to them. So this is how we acquire things. Now, eventually, I'm going to ask that this sign be put up. There's room for it above those pictures. And I'll have a little sign telling people what this sign's about. But I didn't find out until later years. These are the things that happened. An original Bible that was given to Empire Grove is here. 1890 something, presented to Empire Grove Camp Meeting Association. I think this is Empire Grove Camp Meeting, East Poland, 1882. We have our two books that give us outstanding background. parlor table from the lodging house. What else? Oh, this is our original pulpit from the original chapel. It was found under the stairway of the original chapel, so it was placed here. Don't know of anything other. Oh, yes. If you ever want to know exactly how this place looked, this was around 1908. Look at how close the cottages are. We had 57 or 58 cottages. And when Ernest Flood came in 1948, he decided this wasn't a particularly safe atmosphere. So he pulled them out, the ones, of course some of them were gone. When camp meeting decided, when camp meeting didn't become as popular, they came in and took their cottages in the winter and took them to different lakes. There are probably 3 out on Harris Hill Road that they've used for sheds and whatever. So I think, I could be wrong, but probably not. Notice 2 cottage owners. This was in 1923. At a meeting of the Board of Directors of Empire Grove Camp Meeting Association held June 19, 1923, it was voted that all cottages built or bought on these grounds must be built or bought subject to the conditions that the cottages cannot be moved from the grounds. You know, when they came back here one year and cottages were gone, well, they figured, well, they belong to them, so they take them out. No, not really. Had to have permission. Maybe the new historian can get that picture to hang straight at all times. So these are excellent pictures, excellent, of the way we were, and to some extent, some of these cottages are up on the ridge. What else could I tell you? Oh, I keep referring to the old chapel. This was the old chapel. And you see, this whole, you can't see it of course, but this whole bottom section was open so that people could sit in there, be out of the weather, and they were right beside the speaker stand. Now they didn't have enough money to actually build this building, and that's why in the beginning it was called Chapel Park Street, Lewiston. The people at the church in Lewiston paid for a room, and at the end of it all, they gave it back. Because there's one from George Kendall, and he get $10. It was one share, and he gave the room back, or he gave the room to the Grove, put it that way. Now, let's see, what else can I tell you about this? This is one of our newest buildings, 1975. And we happened onto it in a very unusual way. Our camp manager, Reverend Ernest Flood, was preacher at Livermore Falls. And East Livermore had a small church, and it was going to be torn down, and a woman bought it for $1,000 and gave it to Empire Grove if they would move it here and if it would be called a chapel. Now that's where a lot of confusion comes. When people come on a tour or they come at all, they say East Livermore. And why is it East Livermore? So I go through this long explanation of why it is. The woman gave us the church, and she asked for it to be a chapel. And Reverend Flood thought it should be called East Livermore Chapel, because that's where it came from. Well, it was trucked down here at no small expense, of course, and rebuilt. It was rebuilt by volunteers, mostly Linwood Jackson. He worked, oh my goodness, hours and hours and hours putting it back together. We sold the floor because it was the wide boards. We sold some other things just to pay for hauling it down, putting it on a new foundation, and here we have the East Livermore Chapel. It has been used for weddings, baptisms, and many other things. It's a beautiful building. It'll last forever. There was a woman who came down from, I think, Livermore within the last couple of years, and she said, "That's not the same building." I said, "Yes, it is." "No, it isn't," she says. Well, it so happened I had the picture of the old East Livermore Church, and the thing that was different and that was bothering her was right here where these double doors are was a stained glass window. And where was the window? Well, I suspect that's one of the things that was sold to pay for moving it here and putting it back together. It'll last forever. I mean, this is 1975, and our other buildings are 1890. So chances are this will be here. Now, if you'd like to come inside, there's a lot of history in here as well. The chairs a lot of these chairs were purchased by the Women's Society. A lot of these chairs were purchased individually. Instead of pews, it is much better to have chairs, because then you can have a different configuration for whatever you want to do in here. You could have theater in the round, you can have classes. So this is the best use of the space. The chairs originally came from Grace Church. These are wooden chairs over here, and they're hitched together and miserable to move. Miserable. However, it takes those chairs and those chairs to come up with 108 people. Otherwise, we can seat 60. The pulpit and the lectern came from East Livermore. The lights came from East Livermore. So did the altar. The cross and the candlesticks came from, I think it may have been Utah. our janitor at Grace Church. This was wood that is at the timberline. It is distressed wood because it battles the elements day after day. And so he took the wood, he made the cross and the candlestick stands and gave them to Reverend Flood because he was our janitor at the time. Now, a lot of additions have been made to this. First of all, we have a sound system. Perfect, perfect. Because as you see, this ceiling doesn't exactly have acoustical tile. It doesn't have anything, actually. So we started putting money aside from the Women's Society, and we bought the speaker system, and that has been invaluable, invaluable. The organ, and that's a case in point too. That is an organ that was not there. The organ that was there is at the back. And I have tried to trace that organ from where it was made, which I think was Illinois, to Chebeague Island. Now, how it got to Chebeague Island, I don't know. But I do know it came from Chebeague Island to Biddeford. Biddeford and South Biddeford joined churches, and they had an organ left over. Well, once again, if you have anything, chairs, tables, whatever, Reverend Flood would ask for it because he knew this chapel was being built. There wasn't an organ for this chapel. And so they brought it down, they hauled it down. Eventually, the mice got into that organ so many times, and it was costing us so much that we decided to discontinue the organ. It's still there. I still don't know how it got to Chebeague. And as my husband said, what difference does it make? Well, that's so now we have our prior organist had to move from her place into an assisted living type, and she gave us her organ. And then we upgraded, of course, and went to a keyboard like everybody else does, because that up there is just a facade. I don't even know what it's made out of. But it doesn't do anything. It's just there. The actual speaker for that organ is up there. And that's pretty much the story of this building. It's another pretty special building. To the end of our tour, as I say, we are one of the only two left in Maine, only two camp meetings. The other one is in Jacksonville. And this is a historic site. Now, you've probably heard me say that more than once, but I actually mean it. It is a historic site number 29. And those of us that are here now try very hard to keep the integrity of the historic site. But then there are things that you really don't know, and never will probably. You see, that's a bush over there. That looks just like a bush. It really should have a little plaque on it, I think, because the Oklahoma bombing, I have no clue. As a historian, I don't know the date of the Oklahoma bombing. But we had a resident here on the Groves by the name of Richard Brooks, the son, not the elder. And he planted a rose bush in the memory of the children. Now, who knows that?
You do.
There should be one of those little plaques that say that. Because things like that, if it has a little plaque and you know what it means, it might encourage you to present something like a tree or a bush, something that lives. And that is all I have to say about that.
Yay!